It's on the website at harvard2035.org. But luckily, I'll be able to take you through some of the parts of the plan today, focusing specifically on the green part of the plan. And as Bernadine said, Jackie, oh my goodness, said, I'm Sarah Bronin, the chair of the city's Planning and Zoning Commission. It's been a long day as we've gotten this plan up on the website. We're going to go over a few things today. The first one is, what is a city plan? What is the process that we took to get to this plan? What the overall vision is, the 5 action areas, and then we'll focus on the green portion of the plan. At any point, please feel free to interrupt me and ask questions, because that's what I'm here for. Okay, so what is a city plan? A city plan is a written document. We do a city plan in Hartford, like every other town in the state, once every 10 years. So we are in the process of doing our every 10-year plan, and that's why we're here today. A plan just sets out goals for the community. It doesn't say, this is definitely going to happen. It doesn't say, we have the budget for this. It doesn't say that 100% of people in Hartford agree that this is their shared vision. But what it does say is it gives a sense overall of the city, of the priorities that the city shares in the areas covered by the plan. After we adopt the plan, then we can say, this is more or less the shared vision. We can set our priorities, our funding priorities, our policy priorities, our program priorities in accordance with the plan. Okay, so just again, this may be very basic for those of you who've gone through this before, but just wanted to be sure that we're setting expectations. Our last plan was called One City, One Plan. It was adopted in 2010, and it was a very comprehensive plan like the one we are talking about today. It set out a lot of different goals, and I think we can say that we achieved some of the goals in One City, One Plan, but not others. You'll never achieve every goal in a plan like this. So I guess first question for you all is, how many people participated in One City, One Plan? I know that some of you did. We have actually a stronger percentage in this room than in most rooms that we've been in through the planning process. Okay, so we're going to talk first, as I said, about the process. So that includes a timeline, what kinds of meetings we've had to date. We'll talk a little bit about the framework of the plan, and Hartford 400 if folks have questions. It's okay. We're not in a formal setting right now, so again, very informal. Feel free to interrupt. Okay, so the process. It starts with the players in the process. So the Planning and Zoning Commission probably has the lead role in drafting the plan and in going through the adoption process for the plan. So the Planning and Zoning Commission is responsible by state law for preparing the plan. The City Council plays a role also. By state law, we refer over to the City Council the draft plan. So this week we'll be submitting to the City Council formally a copy of this draft plan. Now what the City Council will do is they'll say, we like this part, we don't like this part, why don't you think about this? They'll come back to us with some advice, and we'll take their advice very seriously because they're the elected members of the city. Members of the public like yourselves have a big role to play. Nothing in this plan was just stuck in here because the Plan Commission thought of it on its own. We have assembled, and you'll see some pictures in a moment, public feedback from 48 different meetings, 900-person survey, and other ways that we've gotten input, and that's what you see. So this is very much a public-driven plan, and I think that makes it a little different than maybe some of the plans that you might be familiar with in the past. And then finally, city staff supports the work of the plan, and we have a great planning department. They've trickled up ideas through the neighborhoods, including Anna and other groups, and thank you, by the way, to Anna for sponsoring this event, and also have supported the work of the plan throughout the process. So here's a timeline of where we are, and again, some of you may have seen this before in other meetings, but just to orient people as to where we are in the planning process. We started this back in May when the Planning and Zoning Commission started talking about the need to do the comprehensive plan. Around that same time, we heard that there was a regional effort called Hartford 400 that was planning an overall planning effort for the city and the region as a whole to celebrate the region's 400th anniversary of European settlement. Of course, we are on right now the land of the Connecticut River Indians. People inhabited this land long before we did. So when we say 400 years, we're really marking the 400th year of the city and the region's European settlement and creation as a municipality. In May through August, we initiated a survey. That's the survey I mentioned of about 900 people. We started in the fall creating a structure for the plan. So we said, well, what is this plan going to look like? Let's start thinking about the areas that we want to focus on. We came down to 5, green being one of them, and is the topic of the meeting tonight. We also created working groups in that effort. Those working groups and public meetings started taking place throughout the fall and into January. We got hundreds of ideas through that process, and so what you see, or what you may have seen already or may be looking at this week, is an attempt to assemble all of that into a draft plan. So starting now into May, we've published a draft. It is not final by any means. This is the point where now we can say, okay, here's our best attempt to organize and summarize the ideas, and we have many weeks before we're scheduled to adopt it. Our first meeting that we could adopt it for the Planning and Zoning Commission is May 12th, and if we don't feel like we have enough information, of course, we can proceed onward past that meeting. So that's a general timeline. Does anybody have any questions about the timeline? All right, so we'll move on to the survey. So the survey was, yeah, oh, sure.
Sorry, I just put this. You said that the meeting May 12th or?
May 12th.
So, but when does it go to the legislature?
So after it's adopted, so that's a step that wasn't in the plan. After it's adopted, we send it to the State Office of Policy and Management. That's the state entity that actually creates, that assembles the plans. So it'll go right after we adopt it, hopefully before our 10-year deadline. Okay, so just talking a little bit about the survey. So the survey that we conducted had 25 questions in it. These were questions including demographic information, so who's taking the survey, but also questions about what kinds of things you wanted to see in Hartford. I'm just going to go over a couple of the questions today. More of the answers to these questions are on the website at hartford2035.org. But of the questions, the most interesting one to the commission, I think that, and it changed our view of how we would structure the plan, was the answer to what is our greatest strength. So we asked people this question, we made it mandatory, we required that they choose one option, and the one option that 39% of people chose, is probably hard for you to read here, but that one option was arts and culture. An additional 27% of people chose diversity as our greatest strength. So if you put those two together, 39% saying arts and culture, 27% saying diversity, they're not talking about distinctive neighborhoods or housing costs or the other things that we offered, quality of the housing, transportation options. They really focused on this arts and culture item. We're not going to talk about it too much today, but I just want you to note that that was a very striking answer, and that caused us to devote 1/5 of the plan to this category of play, which you'll hear about in a minute. Yes?
If you go back,
sure.
I noticed that there seems to be a choice architecture problem to this survey because the number one choice was ranked higher. I mean, there may be, right? Because it literally goes in the order that they are listed. So.
Oh, no, it goes in the order of percentage points.
Were these the? I guess my question first
they're reordered.
Is this the order they were presented in?
No, they were reordered.
Okay.
And there's also 3 more choices that are not shown here.
Great,
in an
perfect.
attempt to try to show you that it says arts and culture, but it's still probably too small.
Yep.
Yeah, good question. Okay, so then another question that we asked was, how would you describe Hartford? Moving in the right direction, moving in the wrong direction, or not sure? And again here, it was interesting to see that of the 900 respondents, the vast majority thought we were moving in the right direction. However, enough people thought we were not going in the right direction that it was still something that we flagged and said, well, we're not unanimous on this point, so how do we get to the point where we're actually going in a better direction? And just the last general question that I'll pull out for you is this question from the survey, which is, what is the one word you would want to use to describe Hartford in 2035? And by far, and this is a word cloud that you can create, I don't know how the graphic designer who did this created it, but took all of the answers, and the biggest word is the one that had the most responses. So by far, vibrant had the most responses. Thriving, exciting, fun, hip, awesome, and safe. So you look at those words, and again, that was a required question. They could only put one word in, and the number of people that said vibrant, very telling. And it does somewhat correspond with this idea of arts and culture. All right, so now we've gotten to the point where we can show a couple of images of just the input that we got. Of course, there was a mayoral town hall that some of you were at. There have been a number of meetings at the senior centers, both senior centers, at schools, with various city commissions. There's one, the Tree Commission, Cody, the West Indian Social Club on the bottom left. All the commission chairs of all the city commissions met as well. And then we had some working groups. Top left is Transport Hartford, which is a great group of young people who are focused on transportation issues. And before I move on to the next item, I had it sound like I had a question. Yeah.
Me?
Yeah. No.
I don't know, some stuff I can't really see. But I was just kind of how excited the 900 responses, what was the typical age? Like, what was the age?
Oh, that's a great question. So the age demographic was actually split. It started at about, I think our category started at 18. So we may have had one option to choose below 18, but it was pretty evenly split amongst the age groups. I might have thought that it would have skewed more toward the 20 to 30, but it was actually fairly evenly split age-wise. What was that?
Do you have that data anywhere public?
It should be on a lot of it should be on the website. Yeah. Yes.
Can I build on that question to just generalize? Would you say that
Sure.
the demographics broadly represent the demographics of Hartford, racially, income-wise, age-wise?
Yeah, no, that's a good question too. So there were people who took the survey who were not from Hartford. So it was sort of half and half actually, not from Hartford, in Hartford. So it was live and work in Hartford. But when we looked at the data of those who lived in Hartford and those who worked in Hartford, the answers were very similar. So there was maybe a percentage or two, and I had some other charts. So we've done this survey presentation a few times, and sometimes I've broken it out to show this is the non-resident data, this is the resident data, and they're very similar. So I should say, though, this is not a statistically pure survey, to your earlier comment. You know, this was not, we didn't do phone calls, we didn't have tens of thousands of dollars to do a phone call type survey where you get 100% accurate polling data. So, this is really meant to just give you a sense of, a state of affairs rather than to have a really scientific study. Now, the next thing I'm going to talk about, though, is really, I think, considered to be one of the top-notch research and survey data enterprises that has come to Connecticut in recent years, and that's the Community Wellbeing Index from Data Haven. So in addition to this sort of loose survey that we did to just identify some broad themes, we also looked very carefully at research that had been compiled for the city. So I'm just going to show you a few slides here too, to just emphasize some of the things that we were looking at. So first, the city's population has declined since 1990 by about 11%. So thinking about that population decline was weighed pretty heavily on our minds. So that, again, you probably can't see it, but if you can find Data Haven and go to the Greater Hartford Wellbeing Index, you'll see all of these surveys. We were looking too at Hartford's income levels. So as you probably can suspect, our income levels were lower than many of the surrounding communities around us. But the thing that I think struck a lot of us in looking at the Data Haven data, which is a compilation of a lot of different sources of data. So it includes the census, it includes the American Community Survey, it includes data from economic sources. What we found very striking was this bottom chart, which shows a couple of columns. Again, you might not be able to see, but they relate to transportation security and food security. And 26% of our residents are transportation insecure, meaning that they don't know how they're going to get around. Another quarter are food insecure, meaning they don't know where they're going to get their food from. Another quarter are utility insecure, which means that they don't know whether their utilities will be shut off. And about half of the people in Hartford feel like they're just getting by. So that, again, too, weighed on the kinds of things that we recommended in the plan. What Data Haven does that's very valuable is they index communities against the region, against the state, and against the nation in terms of their overall community well-being. If you look at Hartford's overall community well-being, they've broken it down by neighborhood. So Central, South Side, Promise Zone. The average for Connecticut, the well-being index in Connecticut out of 1,000 is 657 rather. If you look down at the Promise Zone, the index of all these factors that they look at is 393. So again here, if you looked at the plan already and you saw a special emphasis on the Promise Zone in North Hartford or some other neighborhoods, one of these, some of this data supports greater investment in some of the neighborhoods where we've seen lack of investment. All right, so almost done with the process. The other thing that we did, other than the survey, looking at Data Haven and other research, was look at prior plans. So lots of our neighborhoods have done plans. We've had the climate plan, the bike plan, the tree plan, I-84 plans, lots of transportation plans actually. And we looked at all of those and trying to figure out what to distill into this document. All right, so with all of that behind us, again, that's all process. That's even before we talk about the plan itself. But I just want to be sure everybody's on the same page about what we've looked at in drafting this. Any questions about the process? We can come back around. Yes?
Who's on the Green Committee and how often did they meet?
The Green Committee, there was not a committee formed for Green because we just finished the Climate Action Plan. So we used a lot of the information that was done through the 18-month process for the Climate Action Plan to develop the Green recommendations.
The action plan is really those of a lot of people who are city, they weren't necessarily city residents.
Well, we can debate that point, but but again, your question was there a special group assembled for Green? And the answer is no, because we had just finished the climate action planning process. Okay, so going on to the vision. So our vision for the city, you can sum it up by this concept of community well-being. So we want for a much better, a radically improved sense of community well-being. That includes the concept of quality of life. That includes security, food, transportation, economic security. And within that, we have 8 overall priorities. So these were the things that we heard again and again from people as being things that we need to have in Hartford in 15 years on the 400th anniversary, which is the date that we're planning towards. So thinking about Hartford at 400, what do we need to be more of than we are today? The number one thing that we heard from people is they wanted to be more unified. They felt that there were a lot of divides, both within Hartford across neighborhood boundaries and also between Hartford and external communities. So unity was a very important goal, creating the sense of pride, softening these boundaries that people felt, again, that seemed to be something that people really cared about. Security, and I'm not going to go over all of these in great detail, but security, that sense of security that I talked about, health and being a healthier city. Some of the health outcomes, I didn't put those statistics up, are very poor, particularly in particular neighborhoods. Creating a sense of identity. Some people feel like not everybody outside of Hartford knows how great we are. We need to boost our identity and make sure that everybody understands that we have a lot to offer. Density was a big goal, and you can see here we want to increase the density of the city by 10% over the next 15 years. And we think it's possible given the number of vacant lots and opportunities to build within the city. Connection, so again, creating a sense of connection. Focusing on ingenuity and the creativity that we have here, whether that's in arts or whether that's in innovation. And then finally, and most importantly to this group, is nature. There are 5 action areas where this vision can manifest itself. And you can think of these as the practical aspects, the chapters of the plan. So the first one is green. That's the one we're talking about today. Then there's an economic development chapter, more or less. It covers workforce, the knowledge community, our small businesses, our avenues. There's the live category, and that focuses on things like food, health, public safety, not transportation, schools, and housing. Then the move category is our transportation category, and that is everything from the airports, one of which we have inside Hartford, big one that we have, of course, outside of Hartford, buses, bikes, railroads, and walking. And then finally, that fifth category that I previewed a few minutes ago when I said that this was a category that we created because we heard people were interested in it, and that is our play category that deals with arts, culture, history. Parks are in that category, not in this category, sports and tourism. And I'll just mention parks as an example to say that these categories are very interrelated and in some cases overlapping. You could look at parks as a green in this category. You could look at it in the livability category. But we put it in the play category because of a lot of the things, of course, that happen in the parks. They are really a center of culture for us. In each category, we've identified, based on public feedback, 2 key recommendations. And so again, if you haven't seen the plan, I'll just let you know what the key recommendations are in brief. So the recommendations in green that rose to the top were connect Hartford to the river and focus on trees, focus on our tree canopy. These are things, one is impossible without a lot of support from the federal government. Another one we think is very possible with a more concerted and directed effort. So those are the 2 priorities in this category. It doesn't mean that everything else is going to fall by the wayside. It just means that we are really hoping that these couple of things get focused on in the next 15 years. You can see some of the others in the economic development category. We've identified some transformative projects. We've, in the live category, identified gun violence and housing improvements, making no more slumlords a reality. In the move category, we focus on our bike plan, bus and rail. And then in the play category, we've talked about the parks and also the live music aspects. I'm going to actually skip over these because you can't see them. Okay, so any big questions before we get to the green category? Actually, can you see these? Yeah, go ahead.
You said this is a 10-year plan, but you're talking about 15.
Oh, I'm sorry. Good question. Yes. So the theme of our plan is Hartford at its 400th anniversary, which is 2035. That is 15 years from now. By law, we're going to have to do this again in 10 years. So the timeline doesn't match up to the horizon. So we're really planning for 15 years, but we could call this the 10-year plan because we're going to have to do it again in 10 years. Hopefully in 10 years we can say, we've checked off a whole bunch of these things over the last 10 years, and now we have 5 years more worth of stuff that we said we were going to do back in 2020, and then we can also look forward past that. So that's why that you have 2 different timelines. Good question. Anything else? Okay, can you see these lines in this map or not really? Not really, okay. I'll weave some of those in. All right, so of the 5 action areas, green, grow, live, move, and play, we're talking about green. So what I've done here is shown you some pages in the plan, and then I'll zoom into some text so that you can see it a little better. So this is the first page of the green chapter, if you want to call it that, of the plan. And down at the bottom, you can see the four of the 8 values that we would like to see achieved with this plan. So you can't see them, but it's security, health, ingenuity, and nature. We think that the ideas in this chapter will actually help us achieve these 4 of these 8 overall priorities. We also have a page in the plan that highlights some of the things we've done over the last 10 years. So some of them include the first public-private microgrid in Connecticut, the fact that we've greened the landfill, so we put solar on the landfill, the fact that we have revitalized the river in some respects, the fact that we've gotten solar on more houses in the city through some concerted efforts, including a Solar for All program addressing low-income families. We've started a wood management program. We've planned for the North Branch. We started repairing the flood wall and so on. These are not meant to be an exhaustive list, but they're meant to give you some highlights over the last 10 years. Okay, so in the area of energy, and again, this has a lot of overlap for those of you who participate in the climate action planning process. Some of this will feel familiar because a lot of what you'll see here was also in the climate action plan. So in the area of energy, we are focused on renewable energy and we're focused on energy resiliency, which you'll see again in a different slide. These are the goals within the energy part of the plan. So I'll maybe read through a few of them and then take comments and questions about the energy goals. So the first goal is retrofit 100% of city and school buildings. So we know that a lot of our city and school buildings are not energy efficient. We think that we can partner with our utility, Eversource, and other parties to try to help us with this task to make them more energy efficient. Requiring energy efficiency and renewable energy. There's a bill right now at the legislature that would enable cities like Hartford to choose to opt into stronger energy codes where savings are passed on to the end users because the buildings are built better and not drafty like some of them are now. We want to expand solar by 300%. We were named a few years ago a Department of Energy Sol Smart Gold community for our policies. We want to make sure that our policies bear fruit and actually result in solar energy. We've put a goal of developing 10 megawatts of solar energy as well in this plan. We need some changes in state law to make sure that we can do that from the city's perspective. The Energy Improvement District is working to make that goal happen. We're hoping to even build 4 megawatts in the next few years on the landfill. But 10 is better than 4. We want to build the best EV charging network in Connecticut. We are the only city in the state to have EV charging stations incorporated into the planning requirements. So we think we can work toward that goal where we really set up a network for charging. We have set out a goal to replace 100% of city and school vehicles with green vehicles. Now, this may seem daunting, but remember that we replace our fleet, some part of our fleet every year. We think that this can happen. We want to advocate for and deploy shared solar. Again, there's a bill right now at the legislature where shared solar could be expanded. There's also, last week, just closed a public comment period about rates for shared solar. And shared solar is really important for a place like Hartford because we have a lot of very small lots where property owners can't physically install their properties. We also have a lot of low-income property owners who can't by themselves get a solar energy, but together with others, they can build a neighborhood array that they could benefit from the lower prices. And then this is getting technical, the net metering cap for the state, which would help us to build some of these projects. So I'll stop there and I'll just say, did these sound right to you? Do you see anything else that we could be doing in the area of energy? Yeah.
I mean, some of these seem great, but I think that the big thing that's left out is a lot of them are focused on the people here, like live here, or the city's procurement and stuff like that, city vehicles, stuff like that. What about the people that commute in every day? I don't have any hard statistics here, but I have to believe the lion's share of our transportation emissions, which I think is something like 30-40% of, maybe more than that, I don't remember, but the total greenhouse gas emissions comes from the transportation sector, and every morning I see they're the people coming in to go to work, at the Hartford, at Travelers, at Hartford Hospital, the big employers, they're commuting in by vehicle. What about demand management? What about surface parking lot fees to actually target and maybe, I think I saw something about public transportation, or maybe you mentioned that earlier, but
yeah,
maybe something, addressing the demand for a single occupancy vehicle commuting in.
Yes, this is a great question. And so we have the whole other fifth of our plan, a whole other chapter is on exactly this point, on this point of how we make transportation more accessible, but also more environmentally friendly. So if you look at the climate action plan, we did it a very similar way, where energy was in one bucket, transportation was another bucket, but recognizing that they're very interrelated. I think the number is 40% of our energy goes towards transportation. Another 40%, of course, goes towards buildings, which is why retrofitting buildings and changing building codes is so important. But if you look at the rest of that fifth of the plan, which we won't talk about tonight, it's all about the bus system, the bike network, making walking more feasible. But overall, too, the plan has that goal of density. So if you create denser places, and if you make places that people want to come to, and that support fixed transit, like the CT Fast Track, that I think helps to and is addressed in the other plan, but that helps to address the environmental issues that you're seeing, that you want to see us address. Yes?
What you plan on doing with the vacant lots?
What was that?
Can you just go one more time what you plan on doing with these vacant lots in terms of?
You're asking about vacant lots? Okay, so that's the question that isn't in the move category. So we see vacant lots as being an obvious issue on it for a number of reasons. First of all, they don't contribute anything to the tax base. They often end up being blighted. They present Hartford as they're lost opportunities really for the city. So another couple of parts of the code talk about housing and infill housing and development, and also actually development on the avenues. I wish I had the whole plan up, but there is a page called Avenues, is the title of it, in the Grow category. And the top left image is an image that a firm did for us pro bono, Mass Design Group, based out of Boston, showing on our avenues all of the vacant and surface parking lots or underutilized lots, where you might just have one tiny little thing set back where you used to have a 4-story building. And in doing that analysis, visually, it really shows you, if you can kind of zoom into that page, it really shows you the amount of missing, the amount of buildings we have missing, what used to be and what we have now. So, in part, kind of thinking about Hartford at 400 years, we're also looking back in history and thinking about all those buildings that were torn down or left to neglect or left to rot over time that were there before. And it's almost like we want that to come back and create that sense of vibrancy. So infilling the vacant lots is a big priority, but it's really two-pronged. So it's the avenues, which are sort of the commercial, but it's also infilling in the housing. But that's in that section. Yeah.
I know another big issue with Hartford, on top of that, with those vacant lots, is the fact that there isn't parking. There's not a lot of parking because of the private.
Yep. And so in tandem with that, again, I think it's on that sort of avenues page, is this idea that we need to start creating district parking plans. So you're raising some things that, again, other people raise these, and these are great points, and they made it into the plan. So I'm glad to hear that you're reinforcing some of them, because it emphasizes how important they are. But the district parking conversation, because it came out in the planning process, the Hartford Parking Authority is already starting those conversations, trying to say, where can we create parking that supports the small businesses that might be off the main streets, but that's done in a way that it doesn't detract from the community. And actually balancing everything together is pretty hard. You really have to plan for that in advance, and that's what I think they're going to try to do. Yes?
I'm not sure necessarily if you already captured it, but I'm thinking in terms of, for new development, how we would like to promote, lead development in new development that are actually up the horizon, whether it's for refurbishing homes or actual new commercial development coming up. If that would be one of your objectives or goals.
Yes, and so that too, it does have an environmental component, because every time you develop on a dense lot, or you actually make it more likely that people will get out of their cars and they'll sort of stay in our compact, walkable city. But that's in a different section of the plan. All of that stuff on development is in the Grow section, which we are doing a meeting about fairly soon as well. Okay, so to continue on this in this vein, so the next thing that we have, a subsection of the plan in the green category, is fauna. So this is our second of 6. So each of the 5 categories has 6 subsections. And so fauna is a section of 6. So fauna refers to our plants and animals. These are the topics. Yes. Oh, no, you can't read it at all, I'm sure. This is meant to just be evocative at this point. And so what I'm doing is, so this is the page of the plan. It'll give you a little bit of background as to what Hartford has done in this paragraph. And then it says by 2035 we must, and then these are the 5 bullet points in that category. And so, you know, again, we're trying to assemble a lot of information. And this is about what are we doing about our animals? What are we doing about the pest animals and the good animals? And part of that is restoring habitat. And we went to the Tree Commission, and the Tree Commission said, we're really thinking about trees, of course, but we're also thinking about trees as habitat. And when the commission reflected on that, it really got us thinking that that's actually something we should prioritize, even though we're a city, even though we have a lot of concrete here. Thinking about trees as being part of a habitat, thinking about our city as actually being a place where we coexist still with animals. Of course, we're not perfect, but these are some things that we might do. So improve the waterway, improve the quality of waterways and watersheds, restore Gully Brook, which is an intermittent stream that runs through Keeney Park. It's filled with unnecessary debris. Remove obstructions on the North Branch. I know that's part of the North Branch watershed plan. Prioritize pollinator gardens. So actually make this an active effort where we're saying we want, so pollinators are the hummingbirds and the bees and the other things that are dying out in really large numbers because of climate change and pesticides. And then finally, identify and remove invasive pests, which have killed a lot of our, well, here's the emerald ash borer on the bottom right. That's a picture taken by our city forester. But we don't want these guys anywhere near us. But also there's the longhorn beetle and some other things. So we want to say, again, in 15 years, these are the priorities that we'll have in this area. Maybe there are others. Yes, Charmaine.
To see restoring Gully Brook, because of its history. First tribe and workers use that Gully Brook to access Farm River and the river. There's underground for a while and stuff. Help the North Branch, but I'm wondering where the South Branch is.
Yeah, so you know the South Branch didn't come up as in meetings as a standalone item. So what would you recommend? I mean, is there something specific that needs to change between now and 15 years from now in terms of its ecological health, or what would you?
Well, to do some more work on it.
So the trail, you mean? Or,
yes.
Yeah. So the trail. Okay. So the trail is a different. Yes. So the trail, I think, it would be in our walkability section rather than this ecological health section. But the trail is part of the bike plan, which we reference in that move chapter. But we didn't call out the South Branch specifically for ecological reasons. But is there?
Well, because I don't believe in this, but it's a
Yeah.
part of the program, so
Yeah.
it probably would make sense to have both branches recognizing ecologically as well as trail